Welcome to the 80s Ladies and Beyond, U.S. Air Force Academy Stories of Humor, Courage, and Determination podcast. I'm your host, Diane Uhas from the class of 1980, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Allison Hilsman Hickey, also from the class of 1980. Together, we share and celebrate the stories of the pioneering women and the men who supported them from the first classes that included women at the United States Air Force Academy. In this podcast, we dive into the real experiences of those early years, the laughter, the challenges, the friendships, and the moments that shaped us. Because these stories aren't just history, they're a legacy, one of courage, resilience, and determination that continues to inspire future generations. So let's get started. Here's another episode of 80s Ladies and Beyond. Welcome to the third episode of 80s Ladies and Beyond. In this episode, we are going to begin sharing stories from our classmates at the Academy. Joining us to tell their unique 80s ladies stories are Peggy Dennis Carnahan and Margie Clark Varuska. Allison, I am really ready to hear and share all of our classmates' stories because although we have the shared experiences of being the first class with women, we have our own unique perspectives and experiences.
And Diane, I am also, but I'm particularly interested in these two women's stories around their exposure to early aviation experiences and how that led you to basically a lifetime career of being in and around aviation, other than being around a lot of cows, Peggy, and I know that works for you as well.
Yeah.
But, you both went on to fly for the Air Force and then the airlines, and you both have had significant roles in advancing women in aviation and mentoring other women in aviation. So I look forward to hearing, little bits and pieces that tuck into that and how maybe your academy experiences might have nurtured or strengthened that in terms of your lifelong interest in aviation.
Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about our guests before we get started. So Peggy Dennis Carnahan, all better known as, back in the day, Margaret Lynn Dennis. Peggy was number 6 of 7 children, raised in a farmhouse that her dad grew up in outside of Momence, Illinois. Dad was a production engineer for Roper Corporation and a farmer, and her mom was a teacher. Peggy graduated valedictorian from her high school on 26 May 1976, and interestingly enough, another 1980 classmate, Larry DePatis, was the salutatorian. Peggy played basketball, volleyball, and softball, was in the band, math team, student council, and just about everything else. At USAFA, Peggy was in 16th and 40th squadrons as a freshman, and then Deuce, or second squadron, for her upper class squadron. She played rugby. We were teammates, majored in humanities and tried to survive, which she did. After graduation, Peggy remained at USAFA in the admission liaison office while awaiting undergraduate pilot training, or UPT. After UPT, she remained as a T-37 instructor pilot and selected the career trainer pipeline. This led her to a USAFA T-41 IP slot for the 557th Flying Training Squadron, where she was also the USAFA assistant women's rugby coach. And she married Bob Carnahan in the USAFA chapel on 14 November 1987. From 1992 to 96, Peggy was at headquarters U.S. Air Force at the Pentagon, where she tracked all pilot and navigator requirements and worked rated or flying assignment issues, including women in combat aircraft. From 96 to 2000, she was assigned to Randolph Air Force Base, Texas, as the 559th Flying Training Squadron Operations Officer and Commander, which was her dream job. Training instructor pilots and preparing for the T-6A Texan II replacement aircraft. She retired from the Air Force effective 1 August 2000. Then Peggy and Bob moved to Missouri after retiring to raise Black Angus cattle. She also flew the MD-80 aircraft for American Airlines and then the Citation X, Citation Encore, and Embraer Phenom 300 for NetJets Aviation, where she is still slipping the surly bonds of Earth and flying around the country. Peggy has been a member of Women Military Aviators since 1983, holding a variety of committee and board positions. She also is the chair of 2 committees for her pilot union and served on the negotiating committee for several contracts. So, Margie Clark Varuska. Margie Louise Clark, back in the day. Margie was born in Knoxville, Tennessee. Her father was a university professor, and mother had several jobs: housewife, in home daycare, and church secretary. Margie lived in many states as her dad worked on his degrees. They were Pennsylvania, Louisiana, Kansas, Colorado, and finally settled in Florida in 1969. Margie graduated from Gainesville High School, where she ran track and played in the band. At USAFA, she was in 20th and 34th Squadron as a freshman, and then her upper class squadron was the Grim Reapers, or CS 31. She majored in geography and was on the gymnastics team and in the geography club. After graduating, Margie went to UPT at Laughlin Air Force Base, Texas. From 1981 to 87, Margie flew the C-141 Starlifter aircraft, where she flew transport missions worldwide and upgraded to instructor aircraft commander. Margie married B.J. Varuska in 1984, and their first child, Jenny, was born in 85. From 1988 to 1989, Margie was a graduate student at the University of Wyoming, where she got her master's in geography with a thesis documenting glacier retreat in the Wind River Range in Wyoming. Margie then was stationed at USAFA as an assistant professor in the Department of Economics and Geography. She was also a T-41 instructor pilot and had her second child, Mary Rose. In 1993 to 1995, Margie was assigned to the Defense Intelligence Agency in attaché training and also C-12 aircraft training. She did all this plus French language training through the State Department. Following that training, Margie was an Air Force attaché to the Ivory Coast, where she resided in Abidjan, Ivory Coast, with her family as the liaison between the U.S. Air Force and foreign militaries. She flew C-12 missions to support African ambassadors and U.S. interests. In 1997, Margie was assigned as a Joint Military Attaché school instructor, where she ran the attaché final exercise known as Dragon Warrior. Margie retired from the Air Force as a lieutenant colonel on 30 June 2000. After retirement, she flew for Southwest Airlines as a first officer and captain and moved back to Florida. She retired from Southwest Airlines in 2020. Currently, Margie lives in Cape Canaveral, volunteers with the Sea Turtle Preservation Society, plays flute in the community band of Brevard, and is charter member of the Women Military Aviators, conducting oral histories at the Historical Committee as the Historical Committee chair. Margie has 4 grandkids and just started playing golf. Wow. You guys, I mean, what did you do in your spare time? Seriously.
Not only that, but Diane, I was sitting there listening to you describe their 2 histories. There's so many similarities between the 2 and so many intersections between the 2. And I knew I knew this, but it just made me think about it again. The way I really came to know Peggy even better than our time at the academy is when she worked with my husband, Rob, flying the T-37s, out of Oklahoma as trainers. And so he knew her very well in that respect and had a great deal of respect for her as well. So, just lots of wonderful
Yeah,
intersections.
it's just amazing. It's like, Margie, you were like James Bond in the Ivory Coast. I mean, it's just so cool. Very cool. Okay, so let's get started. Let's dive in and you guys can, tell us your stories. Let's go back in time to 1975 and 1976. Bohemian Rhapsody and Don't Go Breaking My Heart were at the top of the charts. Jaws and Rocky Horror Picture Show were in theaters, and we all were applying for a nomination and appointment to the Air Force Academy. Peggy, let's start with you. Why did you want to go to USAFA? What drew you? Just tell some stories.
Well, it's more like, it came down to, I was applying for ROTC scholarships because that's how my sister got to go to an out-of-state school, and I was our local liaison officer who happened to have been a high school classmate of my dad in this little town, was writing a letter recommendation for me. So I stopped by one Friday afternoon to pick it up before the football game. And he handed me the stuff about the Air Force Academy and said, let me know if you're interested. And our town had had a history of sending people to the Air Force Academy, including one of my older brothers. So I sat there and thought about it, and he said, I have to know by Monday. So Monday rolled around, I go, "Why not?" Which is the way most of my life went. It's like, "Why not?" And so I went ahead and went through the application process. Larry DePatis was also in the process there as well as one other guy in our class who wound up not going to the military route. But we were doing the testing and everything together. I would periodically get disqualified and then get requalified, so I kept fighting that battle to stay in the run, and then it finally came down to was offered an appointment, and it was either decide to go to Purdue to look for housing down there for a Navy ROTC scholarship or go to the Air Force Academy, and I went, cornfields, mountains, I'll go to the mountains," and that's where I went, which is, like, a totally wrong reason for choosing the military academy, but it got me in the door. So, like I said, it was a small school. We had 88 people, I think, graduate from my high school class. And so when the Title IX kicked in, we suddenly had sports for the women, for the girls. And I was naturally playing all those because all of us tomboys were playing. And did that, did all the clubs, did everything in there. So I had the resume and the academic background to be competitive for it. It was just at that time, women's sports in our high school were very minimal, and so to have the actual skills for training for how to properly run, how to really do all these things was, probably the one disadvantage I had going to the Air Force Academy because no one had ever taught me how to run, everything was sort of self-taught. So you had to learn a lot of these skills the
Mm.
hard way at 7,000 feet with no oxygen.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you. Margie, same question. Why'd you go? What drew you?
Well, from about 10 years old, I always wanted to fly. And I think I got that bug, that spark, when I read an Amelia Earhart biography. And I realized that women could do that. But I didn't really pursue it until high school and wanted to take flying lessons, which actually never really happened, but at least I felt it was a possibility. And then my senior year in high school, I found out that women could apply to the Air Force Academy. And it's not something I had dreamed of because we just didn't have that opportunity until that year. But luckily, I had decent grades. I had been involved in athletics and extracurricular activities. And long story short, I got in. At the time, they were not approving women to fly. We were not required to be pilot qualified to enter. But as luck would have it, after the first test class graduated in 7708, 1977, um, they did let us receive our pilot qualification and go fly. So Peggy and I were able to, I think, Peggy, I found out probably my sophomore year. Is that when you found out about pilot qualification?
My memory of it is different than yours. We've had this little discussion before because distinctly remember
Yeah.
December of our first year being in the SAR, the Squadron Assembly Room for the whatever the weekly meeting, and they announced that pilot training for women was no longer a test program, it was now official. And I remember a
Mm.
bunch of the guys having a fit, yeah, there's a 81 guy in particular, having a fit that now we were gonna be taking away a slot from a guy who needed it to da blah, 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 to whatever, to go and slay all the dragons in the world. And, I distinctly remember that. And at the time, I hadn't really thought about pilot training. I'd done T-41s, but I hadn't really thought about pilot training yet. But that was I think it just stuck in me right there. It's kinda like, "If you're gonna do that, then I'm going," kinda thing, just as a reaction to his comment in in the room there. So that's my memory is that in December of '79, it was declared a success and no longer a test program,
Mm.
and that's when the pressure came on us, if you're pilot qualified at the academy, that you would go to pilot training. but I know we've got different memories of this.
Yes. I think what I'm remembering is that I got a note from the flight surgeon that I was pilot qualified. It didn't mean that we were going. My memory could be wrong. But then again, we were all accepted, most of us, into T-41 training. I was
Yeah.
in 1979, even before we were allowed to go to undergraduate pilot training. So I think the writing was on the wall.
Yeah, absolutely.
The same thing with the pilot qualified, throughout because everybody was we were watching our eyesight and all these things and our for me,
Right.
how tall I was, make sure I didn't shrink anymore and everything. So I know we had in our mind that that was a route we could get to. It's just it wasn't I remember the official declaration of it no longer being a test program because they were still expanding the women out of Williams, then they sent them to Reese, and then they let them go to the other pilot training bases. They were still doing things in steps.
So I remember the 25 of us, and there were only 25 of us who were qualified, who came out on that qualified for pilot training list out of the 98 remaining of the original 157. And I remember we were brought into one of those bigger rooms in the academic environment, and that's where the pressure really started happening because I wasn't sure I was going to go, even though I was pilot qualified. And I'm not meaning to interject my story on top of yours,
No,
but
please.
it was because of all that drama you all are describing that I just not sure I wanted to be in the middle of all that drama again. But I'm glad you guys took that mantle.
Yeah, I'm glad all 3 of you did. I was not pilot qual, so I was a ground pounder, maintenance. Taking care of your aircraft, ladies.
Thank you.
Let's walk back a little bit to your day. And I remember while
Mm.
I was out for the 50th celebration and they were doing the little interviews, they asked me the question, what was your most significant memory of your time here? And I said it was the first day. Because
Mm.
I think for all of us, somehow or another, that is just, baked into our brains and our memories and our history. And if we remember nothing else, we will remember that something from that first day. And so I guess what I'd like to do is walk you back to that very first day and ask you, first of all, how'd you get there? Where'd you come from? Well, we've heard where you came from, but how'd you get there? What were you thinking and feeling when they dropped you off at the base of the ramp, basically? What happened during the course of that first day that really has stuck in your mind as a really significant memory? And it can mean more than one. So let me start first with Margie.
I flew in, the day before from Gainesville, Florida, and I was paired up with Gwen Knuckles. You probably remember her as one of our classmates. I don't know why, but we shared a room together that night and then took the bus to the academy in the morning, and I was anxious, but very excited. I loved being back in Colorado. I had lived there as a kid, and, it actually felt very comfortable, that part of it. But getting off the bus, the sheer amount of yelling, and it wasn't disorganized at all. Everything was very straightforward, and I was impressed with that part. But I just remember being so busy that day, learning to march, walking at attention, again, being yelled at, receiving our issue, and standing in endless lines. And it seemed like we were always behind. But when I first got into my basic room, there was Kathy Bishop. And she had been one of the first women accepted, and she was from a military family, and to me, she knew everything. I was so naive. I didn't even know the difference between officer and enlisted. I came from a very liberal town, no family in the military, and here Kathy knew everything. She was already studying her contrails and folding her underwear around pieces of cardboard. I don't know where she found it, and rolling her socks. And she was a perfect roommate. I mean, she pretty much carried me through those first few days. But I remember going to get the issue and even undergarments they had to issue us. But I missed the getting the bras, and of course, I wasn't wearing one that day anyway because we didn't in those days, and I ended up having to go to our commissioning ceremony, not commissioning, uh, what do you call it?
Swearing in.
The swearing in, yeah, and with nothing underneath that thin blue shirt. So I had to stand at attention, but all concave so that I wouldn't be indecent. But after that, somehow they found me one, and, it was those big old padded things that we had to wear that were kinda lumpy and baggy. That sticks out in my mind even today when we were it was the oath of allegiance that we were taking that day.
Okay, those are some really those are some really good things, and we were all sort of shaking our head. We're recollecting a little. But Peggy, tell us your story. Same thing. How'd you get there? What were your thoughts when you first got there? And what are the memories that forever emblazoned in your mind?
I remember being taken up to O'Hare to fly out to Colorado, and my brother happened to be home on leave after finishing pilot training. He had graduated class of 75. And so he rode all the way up to O'Hare with us, trying to talk me out of it, saying, "You don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. You don't know what you're getting into," on and everything. Which just, yeah, my brothers always said anytime I wanted to do something, "No, you can't do that. You're a girl," kind of thing. So I was like, "Oh, yeah, now I'm really going." And so I get there, same thing like Margie, I have staying at a hotel, I think it was the Best Western on Garden of the Gods Road, and my roommate was Mo Tritle.
Mhm.
And, and we still laugh about that to this day. We ran into each other more odd times through our careers just out of the blue, and, we just figure it's fate that we keep doing that. But, we rode the bus in and get off the bus, like you said, lots of yelling and everything, and all I could think is, "I should have listened to Mike. I should have listened to my brother." But he was I guess now I know what he's talking about. I thought I knew what I was getting into, and I realized I had no idea what's going on, and I was the perfect they got the result they needed from me. I was confused, I was this and that and everything. I just turned to a little robot and going, but I do remember I don't have as, I remember wishing we had more substantial bras that were issued to us. I remember the element leader showing us how to fold them into the drawers. So you have to go into our drawers, and he had his white gloves on, his saber, his hat, and he's sitting there with his like two fingers trying to fold these bras very delicately, like they were poisoned or something. And when he walked out of the room, we all just I was sharing with Pam Curtis, and I'm trying to think who else the other one. Mary Latimer, and we all just died, just started laughing hysterically with it. And then I remember being issued a size 16 skirt and they said, "That's all we've got." So I had to use, like, all kinds of safety pins to wrap it around me 3 or 4 times, and then I got yelled at for having a skirt that didn't fit. Yeah, it was one of those things where I realized I can't win on this thing here, so it was just really crazy. Then finally, when we did take the oath that night, it was like, "Okay, this is really starting." Maybe this confusion part is over, and I could think, "Let's see where this goes with it," type thing. But that day was just a whirlwind in my mind with it all.
So I think it's a whirlwind in everybody's mind from hearing all the stories. And that's sort of the first day of what then turns into first basic cadet training, or BCT, or for those listeners who are not familiar, Beast Barracks, we used to call it, which is the first 3-week phase of basic training for the incoming freshmen or fourth classmen, or doolies, we used to call them, and doilies we just got tagged with by others. But it all takes place up in the cadet area, and it's the beginning of the transition into military cadets from civilian life, focusing us on orientation, military discipline, physical fitness. So let me ask you a couple of questions about those first three, sort of first phase. Both of you, what squadron were you in, and what stories you remember in that first phase, and anything profound? We'll start with you, Margie.
Ooh, profound? No, I don't think like that. I was a very superficial cadet. No, I do remember the altitude kicked my butt. I had come from sea level from Florida, and the running, anything physical, I thought I was in good shape, but boy, I had a lot of adapting to do. In fact, they put me in a, program along with several other women from lower altitudes where they would routinely check our blood oxygen level and our lung capacity, and that actually went throughout my 4 years at the academy on how I adapted. But of course, we all adapted fairly well. I do remember going through a swimming test, and I was a good swimmer, and I jumped in and just started paddling away, and I hyperventilated because of the
Mm.
altitude, and it was very embarrassing and very humbling, and I figured out right then I really needed to pace myself and that I wasn't as good as I thought I was. But that first basic training, that first few years up on the hill, as we call it, I learned an awful lot about the military. I've I depended greatly on my classmates, my female classmates as well as my male classmates, and from the beginning, we started to form a team. I do remember, on that first day getting our hair cut, and I had pretty long blonde hair, and I got it cut 2 inches all around. It looked absolutely hideous, but then I looked at the guys, and they had had their heads shaved, and I think the effect of having that drastic hair treatment really actually kind of bound us, men and women, because they saw that we had gone through something very similar. But it kind of brought us down to the same level. And from then on, I felt very close to my male counterparts. I don't know, Peggy, did you experience the same thing?
I think so. I had very similar memories of it, of, the bonding with the guys and working as a team. We had the challenge, though, of being in the women's area and being with our squadrons, and I was an aggressor. I was an A squadron. You had your element, which was about 12 people, and then you had your flight that you had to get to know, and you never had and your flight all went to, I think, the same upper class squadron. So those were the folks that you mostly bonded with and you did most of the things with as you went. But anytime you did something, we had to run back to the women's area. And like you, I had like no oxygen capacity either. And I was short. So I'm on the outside corner of the formation when we ran around the terrazzo before breakfast. And it was like crack the whip out there. And you got the tall guys in the front just striding on out, and us little people back here going, like the little gerbils trying to keep up, and it was a killer. But, yeah, the seeing the progress through it and all that, but I think the physical demands for me were the hardest because, like I said, I didn't have any formal physical training in any of the sports or anything that I had or any background with it. So a lot of this was I had poor technique and poor everything else. And luckily, a lot of the male upperclassmen saw that and would jump in and try to help and coach and help you to do better. I also wound up with pretty good shin splints and stress fractures from running on Trotso in combat boots. And it was a good 15 years before they finally healed up all the way. I had problems with it all the way into making major in the Air Force. So it was a ways before I got through that. But yeah, the getting to know people, getting to figure out how do I work with this group, building the team and everything, which is basically what they were trying to do. They wanted to tear you down, get rid of the individual, and build you up as a member of a team and part of a unit. And that was the whole goal of it. And in retrospect, I see they did that very well.
Yeah, wow, you guys persevered. Peggy, I mean, here you are still flying, like, you stayed with stress fractures. Wow, I'm really, really impressed with that, sacrifice, wow. Okay, let's get into second basic cadet training or second beast. And for our listeners, so second beast is 3 weeks long and begins with a 6.2-mile march from the cadet area to Jacks Valley. This is the field training, physically demanding part of BCT where you live in tents, sleep on cots, and complete the obstacle course, the assault course, and the confidence course, along with a host of other military training. You get to fire weapons and do unarmed combat and things like this. So, Peggy, share some of your second beast experiences. How much fun did you really have?
I was very comfortable with the whole camping thing and everything, having been in scouting and gone to summer camps with scouts and 4-H and everything. And that part was just great. I mean, I love being out there in the tent and not in the dorm. Just it was the days were so much better that rather than sitting in classes and taking classrooms doing placement testing and all that stuff every day. Um, the physical demands were still very great. I was not I mean, I was your classic person. You got going through the different courses, and you got to the rope that you had to swing across the water. I just said, "Screw it," and I just went into the water and gave up. So the assault
Yeah.
course, we had these 3 tunnels. There were 3 tunnels, and you had to low crawl through each one of them. They're filled with sand. And they looked at me, saw that I had a larger than normal chest, and sent me through the smallest tunnel. So now I have to basically dig my way all the way through. The guys behind me are screaming and yelling at me to get moving. I can't fit through this tunnel because of the size of my chest, and I'm digging my way out and everything. I remember that just being so doggone frustrating, and said I was set up for that challenge type thing there with it, but I got out of it, and the guys were angry at me because I cut down on their time. They because everybody was racing against the clock or something. Um, so that sticks out. Movie night sticks out, where we would sit outside on the benches and watch movies, and I remember Tora, 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 and a couple other ones being shown, and we all slept through them because we were exhausted. And then finally, I remember the rain, the big Thompson Canyon flood, and how it started raining, and we got washed out and evacuated back up to the dorms. And we had to put everything in our laundry bags. We had these big ponchos on, and we would put them underneath. I put my laundry bag underneath my poncho, and everybody started freaking out because now we all looked like we were pregnant and such. So we went. I remember evacuating there, and because of that, I never got to do the pugil stick competition. So we did it in the field house there. So
I think you're lucky that you missed the pugilistic competition,
from what I
personally.
hear,
Yeah, it wasn't very remarkable to me
No,
either.
yeah,
it was not the highlight for me. So, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hard to even move your body, let alone take a swing at somebody with
Yeah,
a stick or something
with all the
on the
gear
end
on
of
and
it, and
everything. I
I
know.
think I thought it was more comedy than effective, so
I did too. Okay, Margie, go ahead.
Oh,
Same.
well,
Second beast.
one of my favorite memories was also from the assault course. And if you all remember, it seems the football players had a monopoly on that course, and they were all big, hefty guys. And boy, they could yell. I mean, they were just so mean. And I was scared to death of that course. And I'm not sure why, because the course wasn't particularly hard. It's something to get through, something else. But one of the football players, when he's giving us the briefing, he grabs this toad in his hand. He had it somewhere, I don't know, and he bites the head off like that. And we're all supposed to be scared and all, but he got the cartilage caught in between his front teeth. And we started laughing so hard. Kathy Bishop, we just were laughing uncontrollably, which did not go over well. And so we had extra push-ups or whatever. But he didn't even know what was wrong. He didn't know why we were laughing, just the fact that we thought he was funny. Anyway, we went on to do the assault course. But I like Jack's Valley. I had been a big camper, backpacker when I was younger, scouts. My dad even had a survival school. He was a college professor, but he ran a survival school in town with a couple special forces guys. So I was pretty comfortable living outside. And what I didn't like, the worst part for me, was running with a rifle. I was real scrawny. I mean, I was a real stick. And to carry, was it 10 pounds of M1, demilitarized M1, which meant it was filled with lead, maybe? It just seemed so heavy. And to run with that rifle, it was what I dreaded the most. And I feel bad for the cadets, the guys in the back of the squadron, because they put shorter ones up front, and we would set the pace, which we tried to set as slow as possible. But the guys in the back, they were probably just walking. But it was probably nothing for them. But for me, running with a rifle was the worst part of it all. But some of the best parts were living in the tents with the rest of the women, and a little bit more bonding. It was a little bit more relaxed in Jack's Valley. And I remember, Peggy, those movies, the
mhm.
motivational war flicks, as we called them, and we'd sneak candy bars from the dining hall to eat during the movies before we fell asleep. But interestingly, a couple years later, I became in charge of that committee that showed the movies. It was called the Motivational Committee.
did you pick anything different, Margie?
We tried. We were required to keep the selections as war movies,
Okay.
motivational war movies, leadership, examples, that kind of thing. So I think Bridge Over River Kwai, the Green Beret, Patton, things like that.
Okay.
But, yeah, Jack's Valley, I can't say I enjoyed it, but I liked it a lot more than the first basic training. Go ahead.
So you are now in the cadet wing in your dual year. You guys have talked a lot about, even in up to this point, about your experiences in your freshman year, but now you're in the academic portion too, and the intramurals or athletics or clubs or whatever it is. So can you tell me a little bit about what was the transition like? Your new roommates, profound memories, things like what clubs and teams or activities you were drawn to, and memories from those activities. And then maybe you could take me all the way up to Hell Week, and what was that like?
Are you asking me first?
Yeah, go ahead, Margie. You can go first.
Okay. Well, I was a bit anxious about the academics because when we were taking all those tests during first training, I didn't think I did very well. And I had done pretty well in high school, but Florida high schools at the time were not that great, as I came to find out. And I was behind in academics. I was never on academic probation, but I was always just hanging on, and I never knew how to study. I never had to do homework in high school, so I didn't know how to budget my time, and that was a huge learning curve for me, is the sheer amount of homework and outside work you had to do just to pass the course, and, I didn't excel at any academics that first year. Interestingly, although I ran track in high school, I was recruited once I got there for the gymnastics team. The coach of the men's team, I think it was Major Townsend, had seen me doing the PFT. And again, I was very scrawny, but I was real strong and flexible. And he said, "Do you want to come out for the team?" And I said, "Okay." So I did. And we had a civilian coach. Her name was Mary Camille Maddox. And she she taught a handful of us how to do gymnastics. We did have two ringers. We had two recruits, official recruits, Dorothy Mahaffey and Michelle Pompili, and they were incredibly good. And the rest of us were able to specialize in one or two events. We didn't have to be all rounders. And we were able to compete on a national level, believe it or not, after a year or so. I was never very good. I was a mediocre gymnast, but I loved being on the team. And every afternoon we'd go down to practice. It was like a breath of fresh air because we were away from the military. We were working out with a civilian coach who knew nothing about cadet life. It was really a nice way to balance everything that was going on up on the hill. And I the m men's gymnastics team, the freshmen were great. The upperclassmen were somewhat standoffish, which I understood, but they were not hostile to us. At best or at worst, they ignored us. But I remember our dually squadron, I was fortunate to get into 20th Squadron that first few months, and they were great. When I say great, I mean they were strict. There were some flamers, of course, there always were, but by and large, they were fair and they were tough. And again, we pulled together with our male classmates and became a team. The worst part, as Peggy mentioned, was having to run back to the penthouse, the top floor of Fairchild Hall, where all the women were housed. So that, well, we slept and did some things up there, but then we'd have to go back to the squadrons to do any kind of training or other activities. And that was a major pain because we were missing out on a lot of what went on in the squadron on a day-to-day basis. About halfway through, at Christmas, just before we left on vacation, a lot of us were told that we were going to have to move into Saigon Hall into third and fourth groups who had had no women that whole first semester. And I was scared to death because we had finally gotten into our squadrons, became somewhat comfortable. We knew the upperclassmen, we knew our classmates, and now they were going to cut all that out from under us, and we had to move and start completely over. I and this was right before we went on Christmas break. So I went from 20th Squadron to 34th. As it turns out, it wasn't that bad. The upperclassmen were very different than the 20th Squadron. They were stricter, they were a little arrogant, but fair. And our classmates were fantastic. They even helped us move into our new rooms. And eventually, after a few weeks, things leveled out. I wasn't completely happy there, but I survived. And did you want me to go into Hell Week too?
Yeah, you can do that. Take us there briefly, and then we'll pop over to Peggy.
Okay. Hell Week, I there was, a lot of anticipation, a lot of rumors, a lot of dread on my part, and so we studied as a class together and thought we were going into it as well prepared as we could be. Once it started, it was okay, but it was I had one kind of funny thing happen. I was We were running and, doing push-ups in the wet grass because it had rained at some point during BCT, and I was singled out and told to stand up next to the squadron and do arm circles, and I thought, "Okay, what did I do to deserve this?" Because I was completely separated from the rest of my group, my squadron. And then come to find out, well, we went back to the room and we were getting ready for the next event, and the cadet in charge of Hell Week comes to see me, or our squadron Hell Week, and says, "Why weren't you wearing a bra?" So you see this bra theme kind of come through again. But why weren't you wearing a bra? You could have gotten it, your top all wet, and then you would have shown through. And I said, "Sir, I am wearing one." And he looked at me and kind of said, "But apparently, the other upperclassmen thought I wasn't. Everybody was watching me, and I had no idea. That's why they wouldn't let me go do push-ups in the wet grass anymore because it looked like a wet T-shirt contest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, kinda sad, but I laughed about it at the time, but the more I thought about it, it made me a little angry.
Yeah, I
But
can
we got through
understand.
Hell Week, and, all that stress was relieved.
Wonderful. Thank you for all those stories, Margie. And you know what, Margie? You went from your old squadron into my husband's squadron
That's right.
because he was in 34
That's
when you
right.
all came over there. So another connection.
I just have one comment. So I was an upper class person in 34th Squadron, and so I always said I was so glad I didn't have to yell as a freshman.
Mm.
Loose hugs.
Yeah.
As a woman, it's not the best thing to yell. Go,
Yeah, I can understand
you know.
that. Peggy, tell us your stories there, beyond BCT in the real world and all the way up to Hell Week.
Well, we went into Chicken Hawks, 16th Squadron, and I started rooming with Dara Snyder and Claudia Morrison. And but we still in the women's area, we still kind of had our connection with the other women there, so people would come in and out. And so Barb Tippin was also in our squadron, and she is extremely talented artist. So we came up with the idea of getting watercolors and painting the squadron patch on somebody's window, center window, facing towards where our squadron would be. So we did that, and that helped quite a bit. And all of a sudden, the guys were like, "Okay, they'll be okay," type thing. Our upperclassmen were tough on us, but they were fair as well. Our The division from one place to another, having to run back and forth was causing some issues there. So we decided on an early Saturday morning, we all got up and we were all over there in the squadron. The second we were allowed to, whatever time in the morning it was, when you're allowed to be over there, and we were there ready to just hanging out in the break room or the TV room, waiting for that time to come, and then we started doing all the details. I mean, we scrubbed the popcorns popper, the whole bit. We cleaned all that stuff, and that sort of showed that we were trying to be a part of the group. We wanted to be there. We weren't separate up there and everything. Um, I did okay in academics. Some of the stuff I didn't quite place out of things, but I was able to get into maybe an honors course or two in English and math, and sat next to Janet Libby in calculus class. Um, and it was sort of interesting because that was the one class that you had every day. Not You didn't just have it on M days or T days, you had it every day. And these instructors, you'd have one instructor one day and one the other, because the day that they weren't instructing, they were down in Peterson flying the T-37 doing the Stardust program and everything. And one of the guys gave me one of my Stardust rides. The other guy wound up being a brigadier general in training command later on. I kept crossing paths with him all the time, and he remembered me from his calculus class. So uh, I did okay with the academics. Budgeting time was hard too. I wound up playing volleyball at 5'4". They let me on the volleyball team, but I was the B team as far as, that all goes, and it was a whole again, another level above what yeah, I was a setter, definitely. I could serve I had a wicked serve, though, so that counted for something. But, just a whole 'nother level as far as the skill level required to play that sport than what I was ever exposed to in my little tiny hometown. So, it was really a huge learning curve. Lieutenant Darlene Riding was our volleyball coach, and we had Carol West, the Navy ensign, was an assistant, and she wound up working with us on a rugby team later on. And I remember the trainer down there, I could see her, she's a blonde-haired lady, was just wonderful for being like a moral she was enlisted, but she was like a cheerleader for us down there as the athletic trainer. And so it was kind of nice to have support from up there. And Darlene Riding's officer training school classmate stopped by to visit one time on her way from one assignment to another, and it was Mary Livingston, who was in the very first class of female pilots out of
Oh.
Williams
Mhm.
that Margie mentioned, and later on became my T-37 instructor training instructor at Randolph the first time I went through instructor training down there. So, there's this whole pattern of paths crossing. The people you meet from day one, you may keep on seeing throughout your whole career, and it's just when I look back at it, it's just fascinating to see how paths cross along the way. Like Margie, at Christmas time, I got sent over to 40th Squadron along with Pam Curtis and Mary Latimer, and was also scared to death. But our male classmates came over and helped us move over. They were great guys. We knew remembered them and knew them from basic training because we were all in the same squadron. One of the first things we did was paint the Alibaba back then it was Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. We painted the Alibaba patch on our window, and that immediately sorta, yeah, helped break the ice. 40th Squadron there was kinda known a little bit like a I don't wanna really say Animal House, but pretty close to it as far as they were so far back there and underground, and nobody went over there to bother them. And they yeah, all the guys had apartments downtown and all kinds of stuff like that. And, we've they were very good to us as far as letting us come in, letting us prove ourselves. Just like the upperclassmen in 16th Squadron, these guys mentored us as well. I remember Doc Colvin being one of the best mentors from the class of '79 there, really,
Mhm.
encouraging us and teaching us, not yelling at us, but they would teach you and help you learn and help you grow. And they did that very well there. Um, Hell Week, Pam Curtis had decided she was going to separate, so she was in the out processing, wearing her fatigues and everything. So we had an ally back in the room to help us when we came back to do all the uniform changes. Boy, she was pulling stuff out and helping us out and everything. And Mary and I kept going back and forth with it. And our group from 40th, the we were like Margie's group. We studied, we thought we were prepared for it and everything. And the one memory I've got is running in formation with the rifles in the morning. And one of the guys thought he was helping by taking my rifle. And the upperclassman said, "Give it back to her. That is hers. She can do it." And I was not yeah, I appreciated what the classmate was trying to do. He wanted to make sure I succeeded, and I appreciate the other guy saying, "Let her show you what she can do," type attitude with it and everything. And then, when they came over and they pinned on the props and wings at the end of the whole thing we did the Run to the Rock, if I remember right, and came back and they were playing Rocky, the theme song from Rocky in the dorms, just blasting it. And I just felt so good, "I can fly now," kinda thing. And then get the props and wings. Yeah, it was just wonderful. I mean, I just remember that day as being like, "I can do this stuff." And that was one of the first times I started really feeling like I had the confidence that I could really do I could meet a challenge and I could succeed, and it was just looking back at the whole year is what it did for me.
Good. That was really interesting. Both of you have such interesting memories and perspectives on that your conversations have really been very rich in sharing those. So I thank you both for that. And then I think I'm going to turn it over to you, Diane, to
Yep.
walk through summer programs and the like.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing so far. So, for our listeners, after you get your props and wings, you're accepted into the cadet wing. And then the academy is set up so that each summer you have three-week summer programs. One is leave, where you get to go visit your family or go on vacation or other fun things. And the other two periods are made up of various and many possible military trainings. And I'm sure you guys will talk about some of them, then we'll hear them from our other classmates as well. But during your third class summer, so before you start academics as a sophomore, everyone has to go through SERE, or Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape training. This includes surviving a trek with two other classmates in the wilderness of Colorado, where you simulate being downed pilots having to evade capture from aggressors. The other main part was the prisoner of war, or POW camp, where you got interrogated and resisted telling your mission while also trying to escape and help others to escape. And that was the longest 48 hours of my life up to that point in my life. So let's hear series stories. Peggy, go ahead, start us off.
Um, I prepared for I had Siri, I think, 3rd period. So I prepared for it. I was reading books written about and by the POWs and from Vietnam and all this. I knew their stories. I knew, yeah, I could relate what was coming up and put it in perspective. And again, yeah, at the time though, women weren't allowed in combat. So this was all, I wanted to make sure, in my mind, not to treat this like just an academic exercise, but something that I might actually need later on down the road and take it seriously type things. Unfortunately, this is also when my hormonal functions went bonkers right when it came time for the trek. And so, yeah, trying to smuggle feminine hygiene products into the compound and get away with it was a little hard. But luckily, the ATOs were still there, and they said, "Don't worry, prisoner 212, we take care of you." So I was prisoner number 212. Um, but that part of the POW compound that made it challenging for me. I do remember one interrogation with a big football player in a real tight shirt, muscles bulging, and picked me up. It wasn't, he didn't anticipate just how much force was required to pick me up. And I wound up basically slamming into a wall pretty good. And that's always has made it very difficult for me to do sit ups properly. Ever since then, but I never said anything about it. I just found a different way to do sit ups so I could pass all the PFT tests with it. And then on the final day, when they had us out there and they said, "Turn around and salute my flag," and they play the national anthem, and the American flag is up there, and we're all just sort of like bawling like things. And just like, oh, that was the end of it. And it was very dramatic and really, I mean, my gosh, I don't think I've ever been so emotional up to that point for the whole thing there. And it just really drove home the pride in country and what you would go through for your country and for your integrity and to return with honor concept. And that same guy that threw you around came up and said, "You look so scared. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you," and everything. But he was very apologetic because I guess I really looked terrified when he did that. But the trek I thought was easy. I mean, it was blueberry season. I was set. I gave my half most of my jerky away to the guys in my group, and I just lived off of blueberries for 3 or 4 days. I had a good time. Peggy Davis was also in my group, and we were roommates, and people would come to the door and go, "Hey, Peggy, you wanna go get pizza?" And then we'd look at each other and go, "No, we're good. I'm good," like that. And they leave. I go, "Who was it?" She goes, "I don't know. I thought that was somebody that knew you." So you had Peggy Dennis and Peggy Davis sharing a room. It confused everybody. But it was, we washed our hair using heated water over the campfire and washed our hair on the cold Colorado night and all sorts of stuff and had a really good time out there. I really enjoyed the trek. It was hard, but I'd rather go through that kinda hard than being stuck in the black box there in the compound. So, what do you remember, Margie?
Well, I had Siri 3rd period as well. I had just come off leave, which was terrible. I mean, I had had such a wonderful 3 weeks at home, and then to have to come back to survival training. But I had the trek first. Well, first we had the encampment and the instruction, and then than the, track, which was fine. I had spent so much time outdoors. I was with one gentleman, who left our little trio at the very end, and we almost didn't pass because of that, because he left us. And I don't know why they decided to let us finish the course, but they did. But 2 of us finished together, and that 3rd guy got in quite a bit of trouble. But then, now it's our turn to do the POW camp, and we all know it's coming. I mean, but we don't know when. And talk about dread. It reminded me of how much I dreaded the, assault course. But it was that sheer dread again of knowing something really bad is coming, and it was pretty bad. I have to credit Andrea Bopp. She was the tallest woman in our group, and she is
Yes.
the that received yes, she is the one that received the most attention. For the men, they always picked on the shortest man, but for the women, they picked on the tallest woman. And so I have to say she took the heat for a lot of us, and I will be forever thankful for that. But it was a tough experience. You say it was 48 hours? I thought it was much longer than that.
Yeah,
I don't
no, it was 48 hours.
I
I was
think it
actually
was
a cadre of, my
wow.
next year, yeah.
And one of the worst parts for me was that high, whiny noise that was played over the speakers constantly. Of course, you couldn't sleep, you couldn't I actually started having some, hallucinations, I think, because of lack of food and the anxiety and that noise. It was bizarre, but it was I have to say, looking back, it's a good experience, and I'm glad I went through it.
So we've gotten through, into the beginnings of your upper class year, but now you've got more women coming on and more classes coming on. 81 and 82 and 83 arrive, and now you are the people responsible for, starting with very basic leadership and moving up the leadership categories there at the academy. So just very briefly tell me what are, and also, you're starting to lock in on what your academic majors are going to be, things of that nature. And you've already talked a little bit about, being notified you were pilot qualified. So we won't go into that part of it, but why don't you talk a little bit about what was it like 81, 82, and 83? What were your academic majors? And let's just finish off with, and when you got your car, what kind of car did you get?
Wow, that's a lot to cover, Allison. First of all, I was really happy to see the next class of women come. I was a little envious that they were integrated into the squadrons, so it was truly a co-ed institution at that point. However, I have never regretted having that women's area and how close we all became. I think I know every single woman in my class, and I don't think any of the classes after us could say that. I didn't know you all extremely well, but I know you by name, and I think that's pretty great, and the fact that we still stay in touch. I decided to declare geography as a major. I think the first inkling I had that I wanted to do that is because on Parents' Weekend, my parents couldn't come out all the way from Florida, and the geography club was having a camp out, and they were inviting all freshmen who didn't have anything else to do. So I went along with one other freshman, and they just enveloped us, the upperclassmen, the instructors, everybody, and we had a wonderful weekend camping and laughing and hiking, and they convinced me that geography was a viable major, and they also offered courses in meteorology. If you wanted to be a meteorologist, that would be the pathway you would take is through this geography major. And I thought if I couldn't fly, that's what I wanted to be, was a meteorologist. So I declared geography sometime that year, and I had wonderful instructors, great courses. So my GPA started to go up because now I was taking majors courses that I really loved. And interestingly, when I came back to teach, that's what I taught in, those same classrooms. Um, it was surreal being on the other side of the classroom and teaching, but very fond memories there. Um,
What was your
the
car? What kind of car did you get,
okay,
Margie?
okay, I got a 1975 Chevy van.
Oh, wow.
And the reason is I liked camping and hiking and backpacking so much that I got it so I could, do that, really. But it was kind of fun because the freshmen all wanted to borrow it because it could hold so many people. One time we got 17 people in my little short base van, but they would always fill it up with gas. So I thought it was kind of win-win.
There you
But
go.
yeah, and I kept that for a couple of years and eventually traded it in for a sports car. But yeah, I had a van my senior year.
So I asked you that softball question at the end, but the really big question is overall, how did your time at USAFA impact you and the trajectory of your life? And would you do it again if you had the chance for a do over?
I'm going to start at the back and go work backwards from that question. If I would want to do it again, no. I wouldn't want to change anything. I had the experiences I did there for a reason, and I actually had a decent time at the academy. All the hazing and the hassles. I had grown up with a brother and all of his friends about the same age as me, and they would tease me and insult me constantly. And when the upperclassmen started going at me, I thought, "Really? Is this the best you can do?" It just didn't bother me that much. So, my time at the academy was very positive. Even that freshman year, despite the hardships and the tough times, I'm glad I experienced all of it, and I wouldn't want to do it again. I wouldn't wanna change anything. I think I was pretty independent when I went to the academy, but I discovered even more than that when I was there, how to draw on inner resources. But I also discovered that I really need other people. I need a team, I need leaders, I need camaraderie. And to really be the best you can be, you've got to be strong yourself, but you also have to be able to incorporate others into your life. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. So Peggy, let me shortcut it for you. What was your
Okay.
major? What was your car? And would you do it again?
I was a humanities major because, got insulted very badly by a math instructor in the math department, and I decided I was anybody who's gonna walk in and say class 80 sucks because you have women in the class, then I decided I didn't need to be in that department. So I went to humanities and, uh, I have a bachelor of science in humanities, so I learned a lot. I got a bunch of skills from there that I took forward for the rest of my life as executive officer multiple times and such. I had a Camaro, 1979 dark blue Camaro is was mine. And, I do wanna make a point. We talk about the other classes coming in. When 81 came in, we didn't have enough women. I wound up rooming with 1st Squadron. I wound up in 2nd Squadron, so I wound up rooming with a member of 1st Squadron, and then as women attrited back and forth, we had to keep switching, and then finally, ultimately, I wound up rooming with Gwen Knuckles, for the upper class years. And through the first I mean, all the way up to the end of our 3-degree year, I was like, "I'm waffling, I'm leaving, I'm staying, I'm leaving, I'm staying," and everything. Gwen was so focused on medical school, on getting somewhere, on doing what she was gonna do after, it completely changed my perspective on that the academy was a vehicle to get me somewhere. I'm not there for the experience,
Mhm.
I'm there for where the experience will take me. And she got me that perspective, and I looked around, I said, "These are the kind of people I wanna serve with for the rest of my life. These are the kind of people I wanna be around." And that's when I made my decision, I wanted to graduate and such, so the impact of roommates, as we keep pointing out here, is just huge. And then I can always tell anyone who's asking about the academy, I go, "Don't go to the academy to for the academy. You go to the academy for where the academy will take you." If you just want to be commissioned, you've got ROTC, you've got OTS, you've got other choices. But if you want all the experience that's going to get you to prepare you for the far what pops out at the other end, then you want to go.
Awesome. And so what would you tell would you go back and do over? Give it a
I like,
chance?
maybe it's part of being old people now, but I look back at the experiences of my life and I don't want to change any of them. I mean, maybe I'll go, oh, I wish I would have done this better. I wish I wouldn't have been such an idiot at that time. I can see my mistakes, but all those mistakes have brought me to where I am. And I don't want to change any of that because I'm where I wanna be right now. I could be lots of other places and be happy too, but I choose to be happy with where I am and that everything has brought me here, and, I think that's a skill I've kinda learned along the way. When you're in the military, you're told you're gonna do stuff, you're handed an assignment you don't necessarily want, but you take it, you salute smartly, and you go on, you turn it into a positive experience, and I think that has really helped a lot. I know there are a lot of other women, and I think the 50th gathering brought this home to me, just how many women are still struggling and dealing with things that they've gone through in that period of those 4 years they were at the academy, and I, thank God, have not had anything I didn't have any of those type experiences happen to me. So I realize I've got it easy, and they're really struggling with it, and there have been times when I've gotten to our class reunion, and I'm like, "I don't know I can go into that door. I can't walk through that door," and I've take a deep breath and walk in, and as soon as the first person goes, "Peg!" then I know I'm okay, type thing. So
Yeah.
there's still that kind of stuff you're doing with it, and I tell you this last reunion and our 50th gathering, those have been the 2 most meaningful things for me that have helped me put everything in perspective, that I didn't wanna change anything from what we've done. So, would I do it again now if I were 18 years old now, do it? I would don't know for sure because the academy has changed so much, and I'm just not well versed on all that to be able to make an opinion on that one.
So
Sorry.
both of you took a sort of pay it back or pay it forward approach through an organization I want you all to take a
Right.
plug at right now for me because I'm now back to a membership status. But Peggy and Marjorie, for those who are listening, tell us a little bit about the organization that you have been founding members of that have been has been operating now for an extended period of time and what it does and why it's awesome.
I'll let you go,
I would
Margie.
love to. The Women Air Force the Women Air Force service pilots of World War II actually started our organization. Um, they heard that women were flying military planes again. In fact, the Navy women started in 1973, several years before Air Force women did. But they wanted to make an organization to carry on their legacy, and what eventually became the Women Military Aviators is, what they did, and in the beginning, there were more WASP than there were active duty members in it. I was recruited in pilot training. Peggy, I think you probably found out about it too at that time, and we helped start the organization and have been growing it ever since. It wasn't until 1993 when the combat exclusion law was repealed that women could fly fighters, bombers, reconnaissance attack, and all the combat missions. So now we have a whole different group of women that are members who are doing pretty much everything that the WASP had wanted them to do. And it's a great organization. Peggy has had numerous jobs throughout its existence. I've been mainly with the historical committee, and I do oral histories that we archive at Texas Women's University. And anyway, it's a great organization. And Allison, thank you for becoming a life member. And we'll be doing your history soon, I hope.
Yeah, I was a member early in the days because I remember you guys had me come
Exactly.
out there. I was the first woman to fly under the SAC waiver pregnant, and I was wearing my pregnancy outfit, my pregnancy blues, that big
Yeah.
tent thing they
Oh,
put you in. And I came out to talk about that and, what it was like and how to go through the process and all the rest of that too. So it's just I got away from it for a while, but I kept seeing you guys pop up with all the great work you were doing to advocate for military women in aviation, and I said, I got to be part of that again. So Peggy, tell me a little bit that Margie hasn't said, but also tell anybody listening how they get to your organization.
okay, well, I would point out the 3 pillars for women military aviators is to preserve the past, promote the present, and protect the future. So while we're a 501(c)(3), we can't be politically active. We can keep our members informed of issues and show them how they can take action and do such like that. Working with anything from cancer and military aviators to trying to make sure nobody tries to close cockpits to women again. And we've opened up to all crew positions, whether you be, enlisted or you be in the front of the plane, the back of the plane, the back of the helicopter, whatever. Everybody's in there, all the services, and it's a great way to network with women. And it's a lot of mutual support, a lot of history preservation, which is very critical now, particularly since there's the DoD has quit, uh, has basically purged a lot of stuff from the websites. We managed to try to save a lot of that and make sure it's still kept there for recording. You can check out our brand new website. It's beautiful. It's www.womenmilitaryaviators.org, and check it out there. And if you've got a question, you just hit contact, and I get it because I'm the communications guru, believe it or not. And we take it from there. But our next gathering is we have women who
Great.
will be at Oshkosh. We have a booth at Oshkosh. We're doing a rendezvous in October in Tucson, focused around the Pima Air Museum, but trying to record histories of women with a lot of their actual airplanes that are there, whether it be over in the boneyard. We're still working on that, I believe, Margie. And then we're always at Women in Aviation. That's a big conference out there. We're always there. And the WASP reunions every spring out in Sweetwater, Texas. We have a presence as well. And we give out a scholarship for aviation
Great,
too.
wonderful. Thanks for your continuing the work that you're doing for women and the advocacy and the creating pathways forward that you had. So back over to you, Diane.
All righty. Thank you. So we're almost to the end here, but I have a big question that I'm going to ask everyone just to record our responses. I am a data geek, and then just kind of see what it looks like. This is just for fun. No right or wrong answers. Are you ready? So for our listeners, there was this thing called the Bring Me Men ramp that was a stone entryway and archway leading up to the cadet area. In 1964, USAFA placed a sign featuring the phrase Bring Me Men in 2-foot tall aluminum letters at the top of the archway. This phrase was taken from Samuel Walter Foss's 1894 poem, The Coming American. So all of these classes of women from ours who entered in 1976 all the way up to 2003 marched under it, for their 4 years there. So Bring Me Men is what it says or said. In 2003, the Bring Me Men letters were replaced by the Air Force core values that now it says integrity first, service before self, excellence in all we do. Okay, so we marched, like I said, marched under this for 4 years from day one. How do you feel about the Bring Me Men ramp? Was it, for, against, neutral, should have been kept? Are you glad it was down? Or it's like, okay, it happened and that's fine. Let's move on. So, Peggy.
I had absolutely no problem with the Bring Me Men ramp because I knew the context of the poem and what the meaning was, and I had no issue with it. However, when they made the decision to take it down, I didn't have an issue with that either because we had primarily that we'd gone through I don't know how many sexual assault scandals from the academy
Yeah.
and seeing how they had been mishandled and the by the leadership and everything there. And I s yeah, it was time. I think it was time. You had to take steps to try to put an end to anything that anybody could use as a barrier or a reason or a causal thing there. So I had no problem with it coming down, and the core values are good things to put back up.
All right. Thank you. And Margie.
I echo Peggy's sentiments. I knew what the poem was. In fact, I read it before I even got to the academy because I wanted to see what was behind the context. And one of the lines it says towards the end of the first stanza, new eras in their brains. And I thought that was pretty forward thinking. So for me, the Bring Me Men dot dot dot. I was proud of it. I thought it was pretty cool to march under that. However, I was a little sorry to see it go because of the tradition and what it meant to me, but I also understand why it was taken down. And I'm proud of the new saying too. I think it was our culture has evolved to the point where it's just more appropriate what we have now. So I guess you would have to call me neutral because I could
Okay.
go
Yeah.
either way, but I support both.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so you guys are the first two to answer that question.
Oh boy.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I just wanna
That's
say
because we know you're brave.
yeah, exactly. So before we wrap up, I just want to, say thank you to both of you for committing this time and sharing all of your experiences and perspective. And always thank you to my co host, Allison. So, for the same thing. And would anyone like to have any final words?
I'll say a few things. I went to the academy as a very young, ignorant, naive freshman. And over those 4 years, I like to think I discovered myself. I mentioned that I thought I was independent, but I found out that I needed much more than just myself to be successful and happy. And if I could offer some advice to future cadets, I would say do try to find your confidence, rely on your classmates, and try to enjoy the times that you can because it's not all about the military experience. It's also about socialization and finding yourself and learning how to find a balance in your life where all those things will work. Because when you graduate from the academy, that's what you're going to have. You're going to have many, many different life experiences, and the academy will certainly help you in a large part of that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Peggy, any final thoughts?
I and Margie and we talk a lot about things. Kathy Corneran's book, I bought it. It took me about 2 years to get brave enough to read it, and then when I read it, I could only read it for a little bit at a time, usually when I was on an airline so I could turn my head, look out the window, because half the time I was crying. The thing I realized was that I had all these feelings and stuff, and I thought I was the only one who felt that way. I was the only one who had those experiences. And that book made me realize I didn't. I wasn't
Yeah.
alone. And I mentioned it to Margie, and she said she had basically the same thing. A lot of people have too. And the guys, our male classmates, are have been like it was a terrific book. We had no idea what you guys were going through, but we were 18, 19 years old, all just trying to survive and everything, and I think
Right.
I mean,
Mhm.
I am so grateful to her for having written it. I'm so grateful to know that I wasn't the only one, and I think your podcast and telling these stories, at least it will also show others that we weren't alone, and maybe that brings some healing to some people when they find out that, we were just a bunch of teenagers trying to make it through. But we did the best we could, and we learned a lot and we really grew out of it. So I wanna thank Kathy for doing that. Ginny's book is next
Yeah.
up for me to read on all that, but hopefully I haven't had any airlines lately, so I have to make sure I read it where I can sit there and sob openly and nobody notices it. So
Yes.
that's
Well,
it.
we're hoping to have Kathy and somebody that she picks to come on with us as well, because I think
Yes.
she's got some
Good.
wonderful perspectives on that. But I will just share with you, Peggy, if at least one data point is accurate, then listening to all your stories where I thought you all were doing so great and I was just the one that was failing.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, I just always looked up to both of you thinking, "You got it.
Oh.
You've so got it." So when you tell
Oh,
me, for instance, Margie, you were struggling with the physical fitness, and I'm thinking I'm the only one that couldn't make all those stupid runs, it's
mm,
just that is healing. That is
Right. It
therapeutic.
is.
And so all good. Thank you so much for your stories, for the vulnerable way in which you told them. I think they will go a long way to not just helping people who've gone through even this experience, but let's say somebody listens who doesn't even never even been to an academy. They'll just hear a story of perseverance through difficulty, and it could be done, and you could do it just, head down and go. And I think that's what I heard from both of you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Thank you both.
Thank you.
you don't have to be a superwoman to do it either. Everybody can do it because 'cause I'm
Yeah.
the
Yes.
proof that mediocre people can succeed. So, thank you.
Oh my god. And she's humble, folks, and she's humble. So,
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
okay, so in our next episode, we will continue talking with other classmates, hearing their stories, perspectives about, right, applying for, entering, and spending 4 years at the Blue Zoo, as we fondly called it. Thanks for joining us for another episode of 80s Ladies and Beyond Air Force Academy stories of humor, courage, and determination. We hope these stories inspired you, just as living them inspired us. Be sure to follow, share, and join us next time as we continue celebrating the legacy of the women who helped shape the Academy's history.